Okay, distance and midpoint. So I'm going to give you a couple formulas here that you need to know, and then we're going to do these problems. So first one is distance formula. So you'll need to write this down somewhere. I'm going to move it over here to the side. Okay, so distance formula is this. So it's the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. Okay, make sure you know where the square root button is on your calculator because you'll need to use it. So we do this when we have 2 points. Okay, so the first point and then the second point. So all we're doing is plugging those values into the formula itself. Okay, so let's do this first problem. One of the first things you may want to do is label. Okay, let me make this just a little bit bigger. Okay, so like you do x1 and y1, then x2, and then y2. So you just use the formula. So negative 8 minus 4 squared plus the negative 2 minus 8 squared. You might hear the kids in the hall in the background as I'm doing this video. So now just, you can type all this in on your calculator, one big sentence, okay? So you just do square root, which is on the x squared button. Do your parentheses, negative 8 minus 4 squared, and then plus, then do next parentheses, negative 2 minus 8 squared. And if I do that, in this case I don't get an exact integer, I get a decimal. It says to the nearest 10th, that is 1 decimal place, so I get 15.6. One other thing you can do if you want to set your decimal places, if you press the mode button on your calculator, so if you go to mode, and then go down to the one that says float, you can go over to the, it goes float 0, 1. 1 decimal place is the nearest 10th, and then it'll automatically round it for you on the calculator. Not a bad thing to do there. Okay, let's do the next one. So again, I'm going to label x1, y1, x2, y2. Just plug it straight in the formula. Negative 6 minus 2 squared plus 3 minus, okay, now this is a negative right here, so it's minus a negative 3. Okay, make sure you understand that. The formula says minus, the negative does not replace that. So now we just, type that in on the calculator. Square root, negative 6 minus 2 squared plus 3 minus negative 3, parentheses squared, do that. This one comes out exact, I get 10. Let's do one more. So again, label x1, y1, x2, y2, plug in. So 2 minus negative 4, okay, again, negative does not replace the minus in the formula. Then y2 minus the y1, so there's another negative. So again, gonna just do the same thing, type all that in on the calculator. Minus negative 7 squared, and that one gives me a decimal 7.2. So that's distance formula, pretty straightforward. Okay, the next one, this one is midpoint. Okay, so let me give you midpoint formula. So midpoint formula is this, and you don't always have to use midpoint formula, but it's x1 plus x2 divided by 2, and then y1 plus y2 divided by 2. Really all you're doing is finding the average or the middle between your x's and your y's, and this gives you a point. Okay. So again, if you're going to use the formula, all right, let's continue. So if you're going to use the formula, again, label your points, plug it straight into the formula. So I have x1 plus x2 divided by 2, then y1 plus y2 divided by 2, Now, how you write this is completely up to you. So it depends on what you do on the calculator. If you go back in the previous lesson, we talked about doing the or alpha, y equals, to get a fraction. You can do that, or if you get a decimal. So I'm going to do it for both here. So if I do the alpha y equals and type this in, I'm going to get negative 9 over 2. And on the other one, I get a negative 6. Now, if I don't do that, if I just do division symbol and type it in, then I'm going to get decimals. So in this case, I would get negative 4.5 and negative 6. Both of those are correct. It's just a matter of reading directions and determining how you need to do it. So it really doesn't matter. Another way you can do it is just count. How far is it from negative 9 to negative 3? So if I think on a number line, here's negative 9, here's negative 3. That's a distance of 6. Midpoint is in the middle. I need to go halfway. So what's halfway there? Negative 6 is. Why? Because it's a distance 3 away here and 3 away here. So my x-coordinate here would be negative 6. Now, the problem with doing it this way is like for the y, 7 to 0. What's halfway between 7 and 0? So again, if I came down here and I did 0 and I did the 7, that's a distance of 7. What's halfway? That would be 3.5. Okay, so in this case I get a decimal. And that may be a little bit harder to think of, so you might want to stick with the formula. And that's what I'm going to do with this last one. I'm going to use the formula. So again, x1, y1, x2, y2. So I've got negative 1 plus 10 over 2. And then I've got 7 plus negative 4 over 2. And again, it depends on how you type it in. You could get negative 9 over 2 and 3 over 2 if you do the fraction. Or if you do decimal, you get negative 4.5 and 1.5. Again, both are correct. All right, last thing. This one is also doing midpoint, but it's doing it a little differently. This one, it really is easier to count than to use the formula. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a segment, and we did some of this in a previous lesson. I know one of the end points. End point means it's on the end. So I know this is, I'm going to call this negative 7, 6. I know the midpoint, which is in the middle. So this is 6, negative 4. What it's asking me to find is this other endpoint. Okay, that's what it's asking me to find there. That first question mark's a little bad. It looks like a 2. So how do I do that? I'm actually going to erase this because all I'm going to do to find these is I'm just going to count. Okay, so I asked myself, how far is it? Do my x's first. From negative 7 to 6. Well, I had to go up 13. So what do? I go 6, up 13, and that takes me to 19. Now, if you're not sure how I got this plus 13, all you do is you take the midpoint minus the endpoint value. And if I do that, that gives me the 13. Okay? Let's do the y. 6 to negative 4. So what do? I take the midpoint minus the endpoint, and that's going to give me a distance. Oops, sorry, that should be a positive there. I don't know why I put negative 6. Minus the endpoint, and that gives me negative 10. So what that means is I went down 10. So what do? I have to go down 10 from negative 4. So if I go negative 4 down 10, that's going to take me to negative 14. And then this is my new endpoint answer. Okay, so it's just counting is all you're doing, but it can be a little confusing sometimes. Let's do this next one. Draw my figure. Here's my endpoint, 6, 6. Here's my midpoint, negative 10, negative 6. I'm looking for this other endpoint, 6 to negative 10. I went down. Why? Because I went from a positive to a negative. I went down 16. So I have to go down 16 here. So all I do, if you're wondering how I figure that out, it's negative 10 and then down 16. That takes me to negative 26. So then do my y's. 6 to negative 6. I went down. How did I get that? Again, remember how I told you to find the distance. Do midpoint minus your endpoint. That tells you how far you went down. So I went down 12. So now I've got to go down 12 from negative 6. So I do negative 6 minus 12, midpoint, minus my distance, and that gives me my other endpoint, which is negative 18.